I'm one of the founders of WUN, and immensely proud and immensely pleased to see you all here this evening. And this evening's theme is all about women leading, innovating and role modelling in the sector. And we've got a fantastic panel who I'll introduce shortly to talk and for you to interrogate. So it's going to be very much interactive, so I hope you've got good questions lined up. Just quickly, I'm going to run through a bit about WUN for people who haven't been before. Has anybody, hands up, who's been to a WUN event before? Oh, that's quite good. That's quite good. And so quite a few who haven't. So just to tell you a bit about WUN, I think we're in our 5th year now. And we've grown quite considerably. We've now got 5,500 members, and it grows by the week, which is fantastic. We've got, hopefully you all saw the partners, and many of you are partners in the room. We're not for profit. We're very much run with the support of our partners, and they're so valuable, and more are coming to us as we're doing more and more activities. So the more partners we have, the more we can do. So if your logo's not up there, go and ask why not. As I said, we're run by volunteers, so we've all got other jobs, and we have a board and then 13 amazing advocates who really make everything happen, and many of the advocates are in the room. Can I get them to stand up? Yeah, there we are, hands at the back. Oh, not many, 2 for today. Yeah. Oh, and you, yes, and you, 3. So the advocates really do a huge amount of work for us, which enables us to do all our activities. So 11 events this year, 37 podcasts. Has anybody listened to the podcasts? Brilliant. If you haven't, please do go and listen to them. And we've even got podcastees, is that what the word is, in the room. But the podcasts are all about stories. It's all about giving context to different women's careers, some of the ideas, some of the things that they've challenged with. They're a real resource for you. And they're all on Spotify and all those modern things that I'm not very good at. But any of the podcast channels, you'll find WUN podcasts. And then our mentoring scheme, again, we're hugely proud of this. So at the moment, we've got 145 mentees and 76 mentors. The number of mentees that have gone through is significantly higher than that. If you want to be a mentor, if you want to be a mentee, please do sign up via the website. It's hugely powerful. It gives you access to a person outside your organisation who can help you and really support you. And that's what mentors are there for. So hugely valuable. And we've got some great success stories, and you'll see some of the case studies on the website as well. Everything that we do is on our website, so if there's anything you're not aware of, please go and have a look there. But there's also the newsletter if you register with us. Just in terms of our next event is in January. It's timed with the gender pay gap reports coming out, so it's going to be all about gender pay gap, and so that's going to be, I suspect, a stimulating and possibly quite controversial conversation, but please do sign up for that. And then we've got a whole programme of events being finalised now for next year, so watch out for future events coming forward. And there's some exciting other things coming down the track as well, which will be announced in the new year. The one thing to say as well, whilst I've got the microphone, we're also about to launch an opinion survey, which we really want as many people to feed into as they possibly can. So you'll see that coming through via social media and via sort of partner channels shortly. Please fill it in and encourage your peers to fill it in. The more data we have, the more powerful a voice we've got. And it's all about unconscious bias. So that's a sort of a headline piece. I've talked briefly about podcasts. These are 2 of our latest, but we've got a whole basket of them there. Really interesting, really stimulating. Our advocates are the interviewers, and the conversations are always great, so well worth listening to. I've talked about mentoring, so again, go and sign up on the website. And please, if you haven't registered, we started off with just putting everything through LinkedIn, but now as we've got bigger, to manage our sort of database, if you can register on the website, then you'll get all the information fed to you, and you get access into the mentoring scheme and those sort of things. It's signed up, and the key thing for WUN, it's free. So the partners pay for all the activities, and that's really important to us. That actually, just because we're women, it doesn't mean we have to pay more. So all of that is free to you. So moving on to this evening's event. I'm going to introduce the panel. I can tell you their names now, but I'll introduce the panel more fully in a minute. But first of all, I'm delighted to welcome Charlotte Kirby, who's Head of Manufacturing at Salesforce, who's just going to talk to us for 10 minutes-ish about some of her reflections and her thoughts on this key topic. So please welcome Charlotte.
Good evening, everybody. And first of all, can I just say on behalf of Salesforce, welcome to our house, welcome to Salesforce Tower. You'll be relieved to know that we're not expecting a fire alarm this evening because it's a long way to walk down. If you are looking for a great place to take photographs, can I suggest the far corner where you get a great view of the Tower of London and the bridge? That's my tour guide bit over, but we're really, really appreciative of you joining us. And I'd just like to say a massive thank you to Joe and all of the WUN team for putting together what is going to be an incredible event tonight. And I really hope that you enjoy the conversation. I was asked just to put together a few thoughts around women in energy and utilities. I come from the manufacturing sector, so not quite the same, but disturbingly so many similarities. And I want to start off with a comment that I heard at a women's event a couple of months ago, which was, why are we still having this conversation? Why do we still need to have this conversation? And why aren't we seeing any change? And so as I was reflecting on that, as I was sort of researching about what I was going to say this evening, there was a couple of things that really struck me. I, unfortunately, love a statistic, but I think they tell so many stories. And sometimes it's the statistics that really, really ram home the scale of the situation that we as women face every single day. I'd also, at that point, just love to say thank you to the men that are in the room. Thank you for coming, and please do listen, advocate, and take action. Because when you hear some of the statistics that we as women, we know, we live and breathe every single day, that hopefully changes your concepts of what we're facing. So women account for 46% of the global workforce. Here in the UK, we're slightly ahead of that average at just below 48%, which is great news. However, that 48% is actually made up of 9.7 million women full-time and 5.9 million part-time. So even though we are slightly ahead of the world average, that doesn't mean to say that every single one of those women is in full-time employment. Let's bring that down to just the energy sector. Globally, 32% of employees within the global energy sector are women. In the UK, it's 16%, which I found frightening. But even worse than that, of those 16%, and this goes to the next session that you're doing, 15.4% are significantly less paid than their male counterparts for doing exactly the same job. 15.4 significantly less paid. And across the whole of the energy and utilities sector, women in the employment are only 26%. So it doesn't get much better. So it's a problem. And guess what? It's just going to continue getting worse. And I think we all acknowledge that in this room. And we're seeing so many trends pointing in the wrong direction. Workforce development across all traditional sectors in the UK is becoming crisis point. We are not getting enough new entrants coming through. And actually, we have an ageing workforce within traditional sectors, especially manufacturing, energy and utilities, that are aging out of the workforce. So you then add on to that the World Economic Forum estimates that there are 10.3 million net new jobs coming in energy and utilities globally. We've got ourselves in a bit of a pickle. And women are absolutely critical to solving that problem. So again, this isn't new, and we're still having that same conversation. So why? What's one of the biggest problems? And I'm loving to see, by the way, so many young female talent in this room tonight. Because maybe we're just starting to turn the curve. One of the biggest issues that we face in traditional industries in the UK is the lack of awareness in schools the lack of awareness and the lack of inspiration for young girls to join these traditionally male-dominated industries. And it's the old adage, you simply cannot be what you cannot see. And that's why this is just an incredible room. If I wish that young girls in primary schools could see this room right now, because it starts a conversation, and that has to be started when they are young. You cannot start a conversation with a young girl around opportunities when they get to the age of 18, because many have already been dissuaded from being in a particular industry. It's not that they're persuaded to go for a way of a career, it's that actually young girls are being dissuaded. Oh no, that's not for you, that's for a boy. Why are we still letting those conversations happen? Because women are actually best placed to solve so many of the talent crises that we're seeing across industries. We all know this in this room as women. McKinsey have estimated that in tech, for example, if we could double the share of women in tech to 45% across Europe, we could see a boost of European GDP by up to 600 billion euros. Let that sink in for a second. Bank of America have done modelling and have evidence-based research that shows that companies with women in leadership perform better. Those with more women in management saw a 30% higher return on equity than those with women below the median of management. So we're in a conundrum. Not enough women are attracted to this sector, but we're also in a significant talent crisis, and we know that women are best placed to support solving that crisis. Same old issue, or is it? Because there is actually some good news on the horizon, which is amazing. Remember one of the biggest issues about girls can't be what they can't see? Well, look around this room. We're getting to see change, and girls are starting to see that change. In Europe, we're actually moving the needle on women in C-suite positions. 19% of energy and utilities C-suite are now women. 23% of executive roles across Europe in E&U are now women. It's not nearly enough, but it is actually a start. And that's why WUN is so important. It's nights like this that are going to turn that start into a movement. It's critical. Every single one of us in this room and our allies, the gentlemen in the room, we have to be the women that the next generation of women can see. We have to be up front and centre, and we have to support each other in getting there. We have to share our voices, and we have to share our experiences. And that's why I'm really, really pleased tonight to be joining this conversation, so that we collectively can come together to turn that start into a flow of incredible women like the ones in this room that are really going to make the difference. So please enjoy the conversation, please do join in, and thank you very much indeed for coming.
Thank you, Charlotte. And that really is brilliant context, I think, for the start of the conversation now. And I'm delighted that we've got some of those C-suite women in the room, and they're going to come and join me on the panel. So I'd love to introduce Leonard, who is Head of Environmental Strategy at Anglian Water, Katy Taylor, Chief Customer Officer at Southern Water, and Frances Caldwell, Chief People Officer at Gentrack. And they're joining myself and Charlotte sat on these high benches which are never very good for women because it's really difficult to be elegant. That's one of the things, if you ever learn to be on a panel, just ask for what chairs you're going to get first. or wear trousers, it's horrible. It's horrible. Also that, and if you're wearing lapel mics, think what you're going to wear beforehand, because I nearly always end up coming in a dress and you can't put it anywhere. So there you are, top tips to start with. Can I start, though? Can we just do a bit of introduction from each of you in terms of how you've got to where you've got to, some of the sort of key facets or key attributes you've got that you think really have helped you get there? And I'm going to start with Carly at the end.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here and really looking forward to this evening's conversation. So I'm Leonard. I'm Head of Environmental Strategy at Anglian Water. I've been in the role just over a year, so not too long. How I got here is it's a long story, which I won't make long, but I've worked in a few different sectors. But I think what's driven me is the purpose. So environmental issues are something that I've cared about deeply since I was very young. And I've never chosen a career path. I've kind of just followed that and thought, what can I do to make the best difference I can? And how can I use my skills to best effect? So I'm not technical. I'm now in a team with lots of very technical people, and have to remind myself that the skills that I have, which are more about bringing partners together, working with others, they are really valuable. But I do sometimes feel quite different to the people around me in my immediate team. But yeah, I think it's that I'm driven by a purpose around the environment, and then just thinking, how can I best use my skills to move things on?
Thank you. Katy.
That sense of purpose. And I think it's really important to work out what it is that drives you and makes you want to go to work every day, because you're going to do a lot of it. And if you do want to become more senior, you're going to do a lot of it. And so I think that's really, really helpful. So I've been at Southern Water for about 2.5 years. I sit on the exec. I was on the exec of a transport company before that for about 9 years. And I've done banking and professional services. So again, multiple sectors. I also sit on 2 boards outside of Southern Water, which is really great. We were having a conversation earlier about the opportunity to understand different sectors is really interesting and really helps, and actually brings a lot to what you're doing day to day. So I guess what I've learned broadly that you have to work harder than the men, especially in all male industries, which seems to be exclusively where I've worked, which seems like a really bad idea in hindsight. Probably a bit late now. So I think that's definitely one of it, and that you have to make compromises. You have to accept that you're not going to do everything brilliantly, and you have to pick and choose what are the things you're going to do really well and what are the things you're going to accept that you're just not going to do a great job of. So currently, my 17-year-old son is probably burning my house down, cooking sausages. I have to accept that because I wanted to be here tonight, and that's a compromise.
Great. Fran, what's this?
No, it is Fran, thank you. Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm Fran Caldwell. I'm the Chief People Officer at Gentrack. I've been with Gentrack about 2.5 years now. My background, I've also done multiple industries, a lot in financial services and consultancy. But through the HR kind of pathway, I've always tended, and I'm also questioning this decision, to work in those companies with the engineering or the IT functions. So, Barclays Capital always supported the tech functions. And I think I've gravitated towards that over the years because what you've got in terms of your own personal strengths, you mentioned, Carly, about, not technical. But actually, you're deeply technical. You've got the real skills, the people skills, the coaching skills, the leadership skills. That means that you can turn everyone else's technical skills into a bit of a superpower. It's the classic EQ, IQ position. So I've learned over the years to really lean into that and see that as kind of my superpower. Even if I don't understand the code that everyone is talking about and how critical it is to everything in that particular moment.
Charlotte, tell us about your journey.
So gosh, if you'd have asked me when I left university what I was going to do, it was certainly not going to be going into technology. I mean, I am a Luddite to the point I find it difficult to turn the skybox on. But my very first job was for the internet, for the first commercial ISP, and I took it because my parents told me I had to go and get a job, which again was very rude of them. And I fell in love. I didn't fall in love with technology, I fell in love with what technology can do and how it can actually change the way that not only you view life, but actually can change the way that we approach life. And that for me was really important. I never thought that I was going to find a role that I could do that I could contribute to changing something. And so started off in internet, wended my way to Salesforce. And I think here I found something again that was very special. It was the technology innovation side that allowed you to do some incredible things. But to Katy's point, impact. It was so important. And it was how can you use your day-to-day job to actually, and we have the saying at Salesforce, to support improving the state of the world and actually contribute to giving back and to feel engaged. And so that's my one thing that I am so pleased that happened to me, and I hope that it happens to every single person in the world, that you find a place that you can work, but actually that you can start to make change for yourself and your local community. People talk about giving back, but it really does resonate. So that was really important to me.
And I think the common theme, I was smiling to myself, because if I was to answer the question, I always say, well, I never had a grand plan. I've just wended my way. But actually, I always said, have I reached my full potential? And if the answer's still no, you keep going. What you haven't heard here is, I wanted to be a director. I wanted to be the chief of the... And very, very rarely do you hear women saying that. So I think in terms of it's more about the journey, the purpose, the passion. That's what motivates. And that's what breeds success, I think, is common. I'm going to come straight back to Katy. Work harder. This is something that I think lots of women feel. Talk to us about working harder, and how do you work harder without having to work too hard?
So we had this conversation earlier about generational differences, and actually how hopefully the generation that comes after us, who you mostly look like you are, so I hate you all for being younger than me, and you haven't got wrinkles. And honestly, all I will say is if any woman talks to you about the menopause, be sympathetic, because when you get there, it's shit. It's really bad. Anyway, apart from that, I do think
it's... look forward to.
I do think it's different, and I see a generation of women coming up that don't necessarily have to work harder. But there's one, I'll give you one example because I think it illustrates it. So I was on the executive, I was a chief strategy officer or something, and there was a new commercial director, and I really wanted to be there at this particular meeting, and they insisted on having it at 8 o'clock in the morning in Liverpool Street. I live in southwest London. My children went to a childminder, one of them sick, the childminder was sick. They were about 8 or 9. And so I had to use 3 sets of childcare just so I could get to an 8 o'clock breakfast meeting. I look back now and I think, what was I doing? What was I doing? But you know what? I asked them to move it and they wouldn't move it. So I made a choice. Either I was going to miss that meeting and I was going to miss that conversation, or I'd have to do 3 sets of childcare to get there. Now I'm hoping the world has moved on since then. And actually, if you asked now, they would move that meeting. Or you would be able to say, do you know what, I've missed it. That's fine. And I look back now, and there are things that I did earlier in my career that I wouldn't do now. So now, if someone wants a meeting at 8 o'clock and I can't make it, whatever, your loss, not mine. But I know I say that sitting from the position of I'm my chief exec's best confidant in the office. So I'm fairly secure in my position, and I know that's not the position that every woman in work is in, especially when you're in the minority. And so I think that's really tough. I think that's really tough when you feel there are meetings you have to be there are calls you have to be on, when things are late, when you think you need to do a pick off or up or drop off, or if you've got something else going on. And I think that's particularly tough for women. I think you feel it perhaps more acutely, or we feel it more acutely than men do. So I do think you end up working a bit harder. Do I have a massive solution for that? I think post-COVID, the world's got a bit easier. I think men are increasingly making some of those choices and decisions and saying, actually, I'm not prepared to work at that time. I'm not prepared to do that. And I think it's easier to call it out. The reality is at that moment in my career, I did say it. It's not as if I didn't say it. I was basically told the meeting was going to go ahead if I could either choose to be there or not. I'm not sure that would happen today. And I think there would be more people that you could go to and say, actually, this doesn't feel right. This doesn't feel fair. At that time, that wasn't the case. So I am hoping the work harder thing isn't as required as it used to be. But I still wonder if it's a teeny bit.
I think we could all probably say, yeah, a bit. But I think calling it out is so important. And for all of us to do that is important. But just picking up on that theme a bit more, and anybody can answer this, but in terms of that work-life balance, so there's the sort of the work harder, but then there's the work-life balance piece. Have you got any top tips of how to do that when you've got a full-on job and life?
I'll give her one tip and then I'll hand the microphone over because I know I've spoken a bit already. It's compromise. It genuinely is compromise. It's picking the things you're going to do and the things you're not going to do and accepting you can't do everything, either at work or at home. So I picked very early doors sports day. It's boring. You sit there, your kids run one race. They're a bit rubbish anyway. Total waste of time. But school plays. I made every school play. I made every school assembly that they did. I mean, they were also rubbish, but I went along to every one of them. My children will not be watching this recording back. But, so you make those choices. And actually you choose which of the evening things you're going to do and which are the ones you're not going to do. And I think one of the really, really super important things that women drop too easily and too quickly is networking. Networking is so important to your future career. If you do not know other people, they will not remember who you are and talk to somebody else about you and say, oh, there's this job come up. And if we come on to that a bit later, I think there are some really specific things that women can do around networking that is good for them that maybe doesn't fit the traditional men standing around having drinks, at 7 o'clock in the evening when you really want to be at home. But I think networking is super important.
Let's just keep to the work life and we'll come back to networking. Fran, have you got any
I think
top tips?
I think my top tip would be, first of all, work out what absolutely boosts your own well-being, because it's different for everybody. So if you know what kind of fills you up and energises you, then you are more conscious of it and you are able to kind of balance consciously going forward. So the example I give, so for me, it's very much, countryside, dogs, horses, outdoor activities. And fairly recently I had to go on a world tour. And actually I was asked to go because all the male counterparts in my executive team all have a young family. I don't. So it was assumed that it was okay. I can go. And I was on the road for 5 weeks, back to back, 7 countries. And, doing the day job plus doing everything else on top of that. And I'd lost sight of what actually boosts my well-being and maintains my balance. And that was walking around in the countryside, seeing the dogs, the horses. Sorry, I should have said the husband equally. He's not watching this playback. But, all of these elements that were super important to me. And I walked away from that for 5 weeks. And the consequence was I came back and I had burnout. I had pneumonia. I was exhausted. And, there was that point that I had forgotten what boosts my own well-being and therefore sort of blindly carried on regardless. So you have to take responsibility. It's a very personal piece, but, work hard to stay focused on what boosts your well-being and, be really, really clear to hold on to that. And I totally agree with you, Katy, about the piece that you look back and you go, genuinely, did I need to go to all of that? Did I, put your FOMO to one side and actually think about what is going to make you feel better, do better, be better.
Agree. Carly, Charlotte, anything to add to that?
Yeah, just a couple of bits. I think I've found getting into a new job, I really was trying to get to grips with everything. And we talked earlier about endless Teams meetings. Your diary's full all the time. It's really hard to find the time to do the work. You kind of, unless you work in the evenings, you never kind of get caught up. And I think I got a bit caught in that trap in the new role. And then I did see another woman in the team, actually, and she was just really clear about her boundaries. And she said, no, I don't, because she had I've got a 4-year-old, she had a 2-year-old. I can't work after this time. And she worked part-time and it was in her diary and she absolutely did not take on commitments after that time. And I thought, actually, I could do that. I'm not doing it and it's not going well. And then I did, and I just I do hold the line now. There's very rare occasions when I'll do something outside of that, but I'm much stronger about it. But I kind of recognise the point that it's easier to do that when you're kind of more comfortable in your position. I've definitely, as I've got older, kind of worry less about saying no to things, but that's taken quite a lot of time.
First of all, can I just say, God, I wish that I had done what you'd done around Sports Day. For those of you that don't have kids yet, it's not good. But very similar, one of the things that I have always tried to do is carve a period of the day out, whether it's an hour, just an hour, to either go and do something like go to the gym or go for a walk, or to do training and development, or to do some networking. Just that hour of the day that's calendarized, that you can go and do something for you. And I think that has meant that I've always been able to have that little element of time that I've needed to take a step back and go, okay, what do I need to do for me? What do I need to do for, furthering something that I personally want to do? Because our calendars just get so blocked up. And to your point, just, that is my hour, that's sacrosanct.
I think that's really important. As you were talking, a phrase came to mind which somebody said to me many years ago, and he described it as busy fools. We're all busy fools. And actually, if you look at your diary, and nearly always, particularly at senior levels, your diary will be coloured in, from the first minute you wake up to the minute you go to sleep, and you go, I'm really, really busy. And then you're going, actually, what am I achieving? And am I actually doing what I want to do? And am I leading? Am I actually... So quite often it's a really good phrase to lock in your brain and go, am I just being a busy fool? Am I just pedalling really hard and being full, or am I doing something productive?
Can I just make a suggestion that I heard, which was just genius? I haven't adopted it, so, clearly not that genius, is that whatever your objectives are, so you agree your objectives with your line manager, you colour code your diary by your objectives. So in other words, every meeting in my diary, what is it delivering towards my objectives? It's a really good exercise because you look at your diary and you go, well, hang on a minute, here. These are not working towards my objectives. Why am I doing them? Why are they in there? Do I need to be in those meetings? It is such a good discipline.
And I think the importance of carving out time for yourself, I used to call it thinking time. So I was an MD of a business and flat out coloured in diary all week. And then on a Friday, I worked from home. I was an early adopter. And I worked from home, and that was my thinking time. And it was the most productive time of the week by actually going, what am I doing? What am I achieving? So I think that's a real key message. I'm going to ask one more question, then I'm going to stop hogging all the questions and open up. So hopefully this is creating lots of thoughts for you. It can be quite lonely at the top, but also there's that pressure to be a role model and demonstrate everything. Can you talk about any of those aspects? So being lonely, how you get support, how do you make sure you're role modelling for the future? Because you are in a position where people are looking to you to role model.
I'm happy to.
You're nodding. I'll stop.
I did get the phrase casting a shadow. They talk about that a bit at Anglian, that the leader does cast a shadow. And if you're working all hours and logging on at night, then your team might think you expect them to do that as well. So I did get called up on that, and that was part of that, having more boundaries for me, and then that helps to set the scene really for what's expected. It goes back to the point about trying to be smarter, work smarter, not harder, and reading a book called Essentialism, where it's rather than going a millimetre in a million directions, you're kind of focusing on the key things and just progressing further with those. So I think it's all learning, and I think whatever stage you're at, I think it's just, I think it's just keeping that learning going. Previous to the role I'm in, I was chief exec of a charity, and much smaller business. Anglian Water's got 5,000 employees. The charity had 40. But in that role where people were looking to me to have all the answers, and of course I didn't have all the answers, no one does. So I think it's just being comfortable that you're doing a role where you're supporting others and helping create the environment to get the best out of everyone. And I think that's how I lead a team or lead an organisation. Just really thinking about what strengths you have, how to help build people's confidence, how to help kind of create that environment really. And again, that's where I've coming into Anglian Water. It's a very different business. It's very regulated. There's a lot of structure and process. But actually the skills around building partnerships, thinking about things differently are really valuable. So I think it's being comfortable with what you're good at and really leaning into that.
So I think about the loneliness. I think the times I felt most lonely have been when I've been the only woman on the executive, and it's been all men. And my only answer to that was just moan about it a lot. So I would constantly say, I would just make women comments and just say, oh, wouldn't it be nice if there was another woman in the room? Or, I won't say any of the others. Anyway, but the point is that's when I felt lonely. As long as there's another woman, and I had a female CFO. We couldn't have been more different. We did not see eye to eye on virtually anything. But I absolutely loved having another woman in the room, because there is just something about every time you speak, you don't want people to be thinking, she's only saying that because she's a woman. I don't mind if they say, she's only saying that because she's Katy and she's a pain in the arse. That I'm fine with. I'm not fine with, oh, she's just saying that as a woman. And you just know that there's a little bit of that in the back of people's heads. So that for me has been a real thing. So as long as there's another woman on the exec, I'm really fine. I don't have to agree with them. I don't even have to think they're particularly good. I just like to know that there's another woman in the room. And I think that goes for most characteristics around diversity, actually. I think that makes a big difference.
So when you found yourself in that position, how did you get the support that you needed to bolster that? Because I think it's a real key point, because we are often the only woman in the room.
Different circumstances have been challenging. I'm not sure I've necessarily done it right many times. I mean, I don't know. I've just been who I've been, and I've just hoped that's been enough. And sometimes, you get a nasty, spiky response. Other times, you get a more supportive response, and you just remember who the people are who are more supportive, and you take that forward. I mean, you have to be pretty thick-skinned, I would say. I mean, I've sat in rooms of 25 plus men and me, and had to hold my own. So you just learn to be a bit more robust. I'll do the role model and I'll hand over. It's interesting. I tend not to see myself as a role model specifically for women. I actually find that women, I think they call things out. I think the next generation of women coming through just won't tolerate the shit that I've put up with. And I still tolerate some of it, I suspect, because I'm just so used to it. I don't see it. I mean, I'll tell you, I worked in a bank where they used to wolf whistle every time I walked down the corridor. I mean, imagine that today. You just wouldn't get that. So it's very, very different. So I actually think I'm really looking to younger women to say to me, is that acceptable? And I go, oh, do you know what? I haven't even thought about that. Okay, fine. If that's not acceptable for you, what can we do about it together? So actually, I think I'm learning a huge amount, actually, from women coming through these days.
I was just going to pick up on being the only executive on the team, because sadly, as the Chief People Officer, I have not got our diversity targets on track. So I am the only female on our executive team. But one of the things that we have really seen the difference of, because the voices in the room and how you position, and it's very difficult, and it was very difficult initially, to be that only female voice. So what we've done is we've actually brought in a team coach. So we all have, exec coaches, but specifically we brought in a team coach because it's back to kind of like my opening comment around, what I think a lot of the superpowers are of women is around the EQ component. So we've called that out. We've said, not necessarily saying, there's a certain number of women we'd like to see on the exec team. It's actually we'd like to see elevated EQ skills, and that is trainable, that is learnable. So, I'm not in a position, unless I start firing members of my exec team and replacing them with women, to change the numbers. But you can still change the dynamics so that you don't feel quite so lonely and a singular voice. And we're doing that at the moment through really calling out the EQ being a superpower. And helping every member of the exec team to be more aware of that, and hopefully develop in that area.
For me, and going back to the loneliness message, it's you can be in the biggest company in the world and you can be extremely lonely, irrespective of how many women are in the room, how many men are in the room. If you're feeling lonely, you're feeling lonely. And the way that I've always combated that is by having my network, having my larger network, but within that, a group that I know that I can rely on at any given point in time. We all have our personal friends, but also our work friends. And for me, it's a group of women that we've known each other through work. We've made those relationships. Some are in completely different industries. Some are in the non-profit world, some are in the sports world. We have totally different lived experiences in the workplace. And that actually has really helped because we are so different. If one of us is feeling lonely, or one of us is feeling that we've got an issue that we need to talk through, we pick up the phone. We go meet for a cup of coffee. We surround ourselves by our for want of a better phrase, our people. And they might not be with you actually in the room, but you know that they're always there. So for me, we talked about network earlier. For me, I cannot underline enough, find your people. Find those people that every single time you've got a problem, you know that they will tell you the good, the bad and the ugly. They'll either slap you around the face and tell you to pick yourself up off the floor and get on with it, or they will help you work through the problem, or they will just say, do you want me to come over? Do you go get a cup of coffee? And that's how I combat my loneliness.
I think that's really important. And we've sort of talked briefly, I'm going to let you ask questions in a minute, but I've got one more. We've talked briefly about the networking, the importance of having your support network around you, and I think there's lots of nodding going on here. I think we've all got them. But Katy, you had another point on network generally. Do you want to just pull that one out and then we'll open
Yeah, so I remember people saying that certainly if you want for your next job, you had to network. And networking sort of meant going to, this is a great one, but, going to evening things quite often, or it was breakfast meeting. They're always at times of day that are outside your working hours, and that might be more challenging. What I've actually found the most successful way of networking is just when you meet one person who's amazing. So I've met you tonight. That's brilliant. We'll stay in touch. And then I might just say, well, let's grab coffee. And then when we meet up, we'll have a conversation and you're really interested in someone I know. And I say, brilliant, well, I'll connect you with them. And male or female, whatever, but I'll connect you with them. And then you'll speak to them. And then when you speak to them, you'll say, actually, this is what I'm thinking, or this is where I want to get into, or I'm struggling a bit with this issue. And they'll say, oh, well, actually, would you like to speak to so-and-so in my network? And do it on a one-on-one basis. And it doesn't require evening drinks. It doesn't require drinking. It doesn't require evenings. And there's just a different way of doing it. And you still build a network, but you do it one person at a time. But actually, it saves having to walk into that room. And I've been to dinners and networking things, again, when I've been the only woman, and you've walked into a room of male CEOs and chairmen, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know where to go with this. I don't know what conversation to have. And it just means you don't have to have that. You can have the one-on-one conversation. I have met about 50 chief execs of FTSE 350 companies that way, because you just say, I'd be really interested in speaking to someone in transport, or someone really interested in financial services. Oh, do you know so-and-so? Oh, brilliant. Can you introduce me to them? Almost always, everyone says yes. I have known very few people who've said no. People are super generous with their time. So that would be my suggestion of a way to network that doesn't require either that awkward moment, or doesn't necessarily require the evening or the other times of day that might not be compatible with what you're doing.
I totally agree with that. And I think that's nodding. The other thing I'd say is, when you're moving roles, when you're moving jobs, keep in contact with the people who you worked with before, because actually they will pop up somewhere else at some later time in your career, particularly if you stay in the utility sector. It's like you meet people coming back the other way. And so actually that building, when we talk about networking, you're absolutely right. It's not saying you have to go to a formal event, although you've got to come to one. But it's more about actually keep, from this evening, take contact details of one or two people, follow up with a coffee, go and follow that trend. You will always find we call it the tribe. You'll find your tribe, and that's so important as you build your careers. I will now let you ask a question. Have we got any questions from the audience? Oh, go on! Yay! There we are. So, brown t-shirt in there.
So it's just building on the networking and also the book that you mentioned with regards to essentialism. One of the best books that I've read is Who's in Your Personal Boardroom? And I was just wondering if you've got any other book recommendations that you might be able to share with the group, please. Thank you.
No. I can literally tell you about this really funny book. It's like a thriller that it turns out that my neighbour was like the inspiration for, because he's a close protection officer, and it's amazing. And I said, isn't that great that you're inspiration for this book? He said, yeah, in the book, the guy he was protecting got killed. That's a terrible thing to have. So I'm rubbish for book I don't read management books. They have really great learnings and loads in it. Between kids, work, doing everything else, it just isn't something I've prioritised. So that's one of my compromises.
I've got one, but I use Blinklist. I don't know if anyone, lots of nods. So yeah, it's a shortcut way. You just get a little précis of the book, which is really handy. But there's Atomic Habits is another good one in that kind of, it doesn't have to be, I'm going to network with 100 people. It's kind of incremental and building on change. Sometimes you need transformational change, but actually it all starts with something. So yeah, that's a good one.
There's two at the moment that I'm dipping in and out of, and one that I've read before. One's called The Loudest Duck. It's not I know I said I'm into the countryside. It's not. It's not farm related. But The Loudest Duck is talking about. It talks a lot about the dominant versus the non-dominant. So. From a diversity lens, because it's obviously not just gender that is the challenge, but that's quite an interesting read. And there's another one called Unbound. So again, this is a book that will it's actually written by a dominatrix turned into an author. And it's an interesting read, and it will talk a lot about your strengths and how to essentially increase your dominance in a conversation when you need to. So lifting kind of your profile, a lot of it about your language. So I think a lot we can all fall into the trap of having a conversation. And I spoke to one of my leads who's going to an offsite today, and I said, do not start every sentence with an apology. Can I just make a point here? I'm really sorry, it might just be me, but I don't really understand that. I'm not technical, but all of these are, you're immediately coming in with a passive voice. So Unbound talks a lot about that.
Just realised I started a conversation with I'm not technical, but I need that book. So, shameless plug here. I'm actually on the board of an organisation called Opus, and we're a membership networking organisation developed by somebody that was... He was a young entrepreneur, and he was part of the WEF YGL network, and he realised this isn't for me. It was too expensive. It was too inaccessible, and it didn't share information. And so Sam founded Opus with a view to changing all of that. And one of the things that we've done on that is for people that are interested in the community, interested in networking, interested in how they can have learnings from the members, we do snippets. So we do little blogs. We do what's important to what they have found important, really bite-size learnings actually from the members themselves around how they're networking and what they're finding works. And there's a number of websites out there that people can actually share, networking tips. And so I'd also really recommend, those and building, a repertoire of multiple different approaches from as many different sources as possible. And so Opus is a really good place to look as well.
I will add, I read for pleasure, so I don't read business books, but the title I love, and I've never actually opened the book, but the title I love and I live by is Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. And that one, it resonates in terms of, I'm terrified, but I'm going to do it. And if you do that regularly, then actually you move up the chain. So another question, we had another one. Sorry, Louise. See, we get our board members to do the mic. We're not proud.
Thank you so much. Everything you've been talking about resonated deeply, but there was a horrifying moment when Katy was talking about those 8 a.m. meetings. Two things resonated to me. Carly, you were talking about being new at the job. I'm new at the job for 3 months now in a leadership position. But then Katy was talking about these 8 a.m. meetings, and I realised that I'm actually the person who's creating those meetings. And I realised because we take care of clients, and that's like what we take closest to the heart. I realised that there is this conflict between the culture and what we're actually giving to our employees who are working with us, but also being tuned to make sure that we provide the best class of the services to our clients, especially if our team's been dispersed all over the globe, including Australia. And I realized that I'm somehow turned in those two worlds. So I'd love to hear your points on that, whether you have been in that position early in your career. I know that you've been sitting at boards and you have tremendous experience in this. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that, on those conflicts. Thank you.
I would say my best way of dealing with it is trade-offs. So if you accept that you have to do the 8 o'clock, then you finish early. You finish at 3 o'clock, or you say, actually, on Friday, I'm basically going to bunk off for the afternoon. And so I think there's something about trade-offs, which is accepting that, you know, if your client wants you to do that. I mean, we work in the utility sector. It turns out there are no really nice quiet weeks, and so the reality is, you know, I'm on calls at 11 o'clock at night sometimes. But if I'm doing that, then I make sure that whenever I get a chance, I'll take back a few hours and I'll do something for me. So I just think it's the trade-off. And the reality is I suspect every single person, the fact that you're in this room means that you're already doing more than your job. You're already going further. You're already putting in more hours. No one's ever going to sit down and look at your hours at the end of the week and go, you've only just scraped 37 and a half. You need to work harder. That won't be said for any of you here, because if it was, you wouldn't be here. And so therefore, you need to own that. And I think others have talked about that. You have to own your personal space. So what are the things you are going to do and you're not going to do? And then how are you going to make sure that you are claiming some of that time back? And also accepting you will never get it all done. You will never get it all done. There will always be more work at work. There will always be more work at home. There will always be more to do. You have to start accepting that you can just do what you can do. I mean, I literally have, this is not a woman thing, this is an everyone thing. I've had this conversation with 2 team members today. There will always be more work. You have to learn, and it's on you. It's on you to say, I've done the best I can do for today. I've prioritised my tasks. Now I have to do the rest. I will come back tomorrow and I will have another go and I will get through that. But I cannot do it all today, because the only person who suffers is you. The company will carry on. The work will carry on. You will be the one that suffers. So that's on you. And it's tough. I'm not saying any of us have got it right, I don't think. But you have to learn it.
The overlay to that is to sometimes when you're thinking, oh, I've got to do that because of, I've got to do it, go, actually, who's putting the pressure on me to do that? It's me. It's me trying to be all things to everybody. And if you begin to own it, exactly as Katy says, then you go, actually, I'm allowed. And very often it's us who are driving ourselves and feel that we're having to do. But actually, if you're doing a really good job and you're working really hard and you're doing, you're focused on the right things, nobody's going to complain.
Just one build on that. As a leader, just always give the context of why. There is times that you do need to get on those early calls. There is times you need to set team calls that are not. I work for a company. It's New Zealand, Australia, India, UK. It's when you get on a global call, someone is suffering. And actually, usually New Zealand and the UK are both suffering because the time difference is so immense that it's antisocial, whichever way you look at it. But so if you've got to do those meetings, and picking up what Carly said as well, from like casting shade and shadow, and I explain why. My team always know why. This one's critical. We don't save lives, so it's not that critical. But you know what? We need to put it at this time because it's the only time that right now works with our time zones, and it's just easier if we're all on the call together.
I was just going to say, because I think you said about being in that position where you're kind of imposing that on others. So I guess it's something about the culture of the organisation, and as long as you recognise that it's a compromise, and just, I think as has been said, just the reasons for it, and then sometimes question, do we need to do this? Could it be later? What would make it more convenient for the people taking part? I think as long as you're thinking about people, that goes a long way. And I think that could just be part of that, just revisiting how many of these are essential. Could they be changed? Are there other ways to achieve the same thing? But I think people genuinely just feel, if they're feeling valued, then they're kind of probably more willing to go the extra mile when they need to.
Maybe don't enforce Teams video. That's the other tip.
In your pyjamas.
If it's really antisocial, one of my team members is like, I'm not being rude, but I have zero makeup on and I am in my pyjamas. And I'm like, none of us need to see that.
I would just say, don't wait for permission to compromise. Nobody's actually going to give you that permission. You have to give yourself that permission. That's a slightly different thing.
One more question, and then we'll break for more networking. Who are we going to go on? You choose, Louise.
I'm a software engineer, so I'm also familiar with this feeling of being in a room that's predominantly male. For the first time in my career, I'm now working with another female developer, and I'm in a bit of a mentoring role. So I was wondering if you have any stories or anecdotes from your careers of people who empowered you and helped you become the leaders that you are, so that I can also do the same for other women in tech.
I've just got a small example where I've not been through any formal mentoring, but it was quite early in my career, and I worked for a local authority, and they were going through a big change program, and they had somebody in charge of the change team who was completely different to anyone else that worked there. She was amazing, but I think she just saw some potential in me, and she just showed me that she really believed in me and my skills, and it just wasn't that kind of environment where you would get that kind of feedback. So that went a really long way, and I think that really stuck with me. So I'm doing some coaching now. I'm having some coaching, and I'm learning about coaching. And I think just that believing in someone's potential, helping them see that their answers are within them, I think that's really powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say so I'm also having coaching and having mentoring. So just it doesn't stop. You know, you are always learning and always doing things differently. And you know, there's a whole stack of actions I've got at the back of my pad saying these are the things that I need to do differently when I show up. So you know, the idea that it stops is totally false. And the biggest ones for me was when I got given a coach. I thought that was super helpful, and that really helped me sit in a room of people who I thought were massively more qualified than I was. I'd been in the industry for years. I was in transport at the time, and they said, look, you don't have to know everything. You just have to be confident in how you bring them together, and that was really helpful. So I think there's always space for coaching. And the only other thing is I had a CFO who said to me, just do the job that you want to get. So in other words, there was acting that job, start doing that job. So quite often people do mentoring because they want to move into a new role or they want to move up. Actually, having someone empower you and just say, why don't you start doing things in that role? And that's what I say to people now. I'm like, own it. Act as if that's your job now. No one's going to stop you, because actually chances are you're going to deliver more rather than delivering less. So I think that's a really powerful part of mentoring, is just encouraging people to really lean into their skills and assets and to deliver on it.
I totally echo, and this piece around coaching and mentoring, they are supremely different, but they're both so important. And I think Katie's points around how you can network effectively. If you see, the networking piece is really your mentoring piece, right? This is your great opportunity. Having a coach or being a coach or learning coaching skills is amazing. And just be open, listen, and take advice and provide advice. So it's fantastic to hear, that you're, consciously thinking about how can I create an environment where this person can learn and feel supported and grow.
For me, I have mentors from all different ages and spheres, and that's been really, really important for me, especially as I've unfortunately got older. There are so many differing perspectives. Young, we've now, what are we on? Where are we? Gen Z, Gen X, Millennials, Gen A? Exactly, we're starting again. But every single generation has a different point of view and react in different ways. And so for me, it's not just been mentoring from somebody that has more experience or more age experience than me. I've actually also, especially recently, the advice that I have been getting from younger people that I've asked to mentor me and almost, walk me through things has been so invaluable. So mentoring cuts across all ages. You can learn so much from every single direction. Soak it in.
And I think that the anecdote that comes to mind for me was just actually because beforehand we were talking about all of us, even now, can sit in a room and we'll say something and then somebody else will say it 5 minutes later and you'll go, well, hang on, I said that. Does that sound familiar to anybody? It seems to be a really consistent theme. And relatively early on in my career, I had a great she was a boss, but she was also sort of a mentor as well. And I was having a bit of a moan about, I keep saying these things. And she just looked at me dead in the eye. She says, stop worrying about that. Cream rises to the top. And that's stuck with me ever since. It's like, don't worry about some of that stuff. Don't worry about other people's behaviour. Worry about you and do your job. And I think that will hold you in good stead. I'm really conscious we're running out of time and we've still got some more networking and food and drink and stuff through there. I'm going to ask very quickly a snippy, one piece of advice, top tip.
I think it's
Katy
got to
quickly gives it
be
to
yourself.
Okay, give the microphone to somebody else. That's the first one.
Be yourself, I think, has to be. And I probably spent some time thinking I had to be a certain way to be a leader or behave in a certain way or have certain attributes. But I think you are what you've got. So you kind of get comfortable with it and do that. And I think you'll thrive.
Yeah, I think what you said, don't sweat the small stuff. Let some of that stuff go. Be the better person, do the right things, even if people around you aren't. You have to go home and live with yourself at the end of the day.
I guess mine would be always hold the mirror up. So it's a bit of a build on both. Your self-awareness, which is a key part of EQ, is your superpower. So if you're conscious all the time, you're really have a high self-awareness, then all of these like networking opportunities, development opportunities, you'll just absorb them so much more effectively.
Never be afraid of saying yes. If an opportunity comes your way, even if you're thinking, oh my God, grasp it, because you never ever know where that's going to take you. It will take you somewhere totally unexpected, totally amazing, but only if you say yes.
And because I've asked the question, I'm going to say one too. If you're not having fun and you're not feeling challenged, change it. Because it won't change for you, so you change it. So move job, go and do something different, and actually that will help you with your career. But don't sit there grumbling because it's not right. Go and change it. I'm going to call a line there. You know who they all are now, so when we're networking out there, you can go and ask more questions. It's been fantastic to have you all here. Thank you so much. Real insights and honesty. I think that's the piece. Everybody is a human being, whether you're a leader of an organisation or not. It's that honesty and humility, I think, runs all the way through. So brilliant to have you in those roles and leading the way. I'd like to say thank you very much, and to you as well. Thank you very much.